Hey everybody, Average Picker here. This video is mostly for Roon Picker, who, if you don't know, he's going for his black belt rank, I guess, and he's fulfilling the obligation of build a lock, which I think is pretty interesting. We were texting, and I was joking with him the other day because I had thought about if I ever, went on to do that, of making it out of like cardboard, like with shoe boxes and toilet paper tubes. Because I don't think there's a stipulation on what it has to be made out of. But anyway, he's got some videos documenting this build. I'm going to throw a few pictures in here because we're talking about, well, how would you tension this lock? And I said, well, I'll try to come up with a lot of ways to tension it, or what I can think of, and throw some stuff out there and do a video for you. So here we are. So yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting and clever little way to do that lock if it works all out. That using a hitch pin for the key, I think is pretty neat. Wide open keyway and stuff there. That shouldn't be a problem. So yeah, very clever. I'm going to use this thing to kind of simulate maybe some stuff. But yeah, how should we do this? Let's flip the camera. So we're just going to imagine that this core here is the lock, or is his core. It looks really big. I think it's neat too that it's oval shaped. I don't know how that would affect tensioning, having that weird oval rotation kind of to it. It's very interesting. But yeah, my gut instinct when I first saw the picture of it was just jab my finger on it and get some pressure, or like that, and just see if I can give it a twist. So he's going to trim the edges down and stuff, he said, so you couldn't really grab it, but it seems big enough, that you could just get a thumb on there and kind of get some rotation going. So that was my first thought, just use a finger. And I know a lot of these we talked about on the text. Another one was to make a notch on it. That's kind of the destructive-ish way. It would definitely show that somebody had been tampering with it, right? But you could cut a notch, just a sliver, just something wide enough. You could get a tension wrench on just to apply a little bit of tension to it. So just a little tiny sliver through there. Not much you can do to get around that. Actually, there kind of is. And I've got one idea for that. But one idea was to have a spin. If you could somehow do a spinner. Pin a spinner on the front. If someone were to try to notch it, that would just spin around. But I don't know. I started to wonder, if you had a spinner just pinned to the front, would you be able to wedge that spinner up a little bit, right? That spinner would be sitting like that. Could you wedge it up and use that actually then to leverage some tension on the lock? Just depending on how that spinner was mounted. It would probably be better if it was mounted in some kind of ring around a rim and then capped over the top of it, as opposed to pinning it to the core itself, just because you could do something like that. So my other idea was to use something like this, and this is used for spreading C-clips, and I've got a right angle tip as well, so it kind of makes a turn and comes off here, and that's probably what I would go to and use, not these straight tipped ones. But yeah, the idea would be, can I get it in that hole and then squeeze tension and hold the tension that way, to get that going. You could even, depending on how much of the tips you could get in, you could get some kind of sandpaper or little rubber grip or something maybe on there. But yeah, just any kind of tool similar to this, or to like those reverse tweezers. I think I've got a pair around here somewhere. When you squeeze, it spreads, and you could try to get that in there, especially if you had right angle tips, just to squeeze against the inside of that core and get some rotation going with it. Probably have to keep pretty good grip on it. But I think it would maybe work, probably. Does this pen work? Let's see. Yeah, okay. So my other idea, it's kind of the same idea done in two different ways. One is to get a used cork. So buy a bottle of wine, pop the cork drink the bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne, right? Because the cork swells, right? And so what you kind of end up with is going to be an exaggerated drawing, but you'll see where I'm going with this because it's the same idea. It's to make a wedge. Use the cork as a wedge, right? So I mean, if that's our wine cork, or anything that's kind of wedge shaped. Hey, look at this. I actually found a bit of cork, right? So I mean, you can see how it's kind of wedge shaped, you know? And so my idea though was, yeah, if you cut this in half, right? We'd basically have something like that. And, you know, because cork is spongy and expands out, I was like, you know, if you got it shaved down enough, you know, God, this is going to look terrible, isn't it? You could just plug in there and get enough force on the bottom half of the cork, right? So almost like this part that's outlined. Get enough force on that it would give you tension, and then meanwhile you've got this whole top half of the cork gone, so you'd be able to work from there, you know, with a pick or something, be basically resting on that cork. If that makes any sense. I mean, you could even probably shave something like this down quite a bit. I've never tried to tension anything with a cork. I don't know how much you could get in there. I don't know how much you could take off of this and wedge in there that you would still be able to get some tension and it wouldn't just kind of crumple on itself. But yeah, that was one of my ideas, was like, God, get in there with a wedge that kind of expands and pushes. Maybe that made that idea make more sense. I don't know, hopefully. The other idea was to do this with something metal, especially like, I mean, we're getting into more and more specialized tools, right? And as we do that, we're getting further away from, you know, and it's getting more and more effective. But you know, something like this, like a follower, if you could shave it a little bit, or just get anything, you know, that's going to wedge itself, get a good slit cut in there, just cut it short, right? You know, we don't need this whole thing, even if this was hollow all the way through. We just need a little bit, because we just need enough to get in there and wedge itself that we can then apply tension with another tensioner right through that slot, if that makes sense. So you could do something like that, right? And if this thing was only like this short, that would still give you enough room to eat, and you wouldn't be so far back that you would need a specialized pick with a, you know, long pick shank on it. But you'd be able to get in there and manipulate the pins that way. So you'd build something like that that was wedge shaped and could wedge itself into that hole. But like I said, that seems like it's getting really far ahead of things. And this is mostly what I wanted to do the video for, because I wasn't sure if this wedge slit idea would translate well in a text message. Cutting something like this down, but you know, I mean, at that point we're shaping metal, and that's a lot further down the line, I guess, of things. But you know, that's got kind of a wedge shape to it, and I was like, yeah, I wonder, would you be able to just cut that? You know, because that amount of section is almost all we might need to cram into that hole and grab enough tension. And because it's, you know, a pen, there'd be enough room to get a pick through that and probably work it a little bit. And if we had to, we could maybe slit the top. So I was wondering if you could use a pen, depending on how that pen was shaped, if it was something like this. I've got one in the other room. It's probably a little bit better of an idea, because that's what gave me an idea when I looked at it. But yeah, the other idea I had for you, looking at the design, it seems like it's a good candidate to split the core on. And what I mean is, if you weren't sure, I haven't checked my text messages, my phone's been charging. Basically cut the core across, say the first, or after the first pin chamber, or maybe even the second, you know, split it down the middle. So that way, if you did wedge something in here to get tension on it, you would only be tensioning this first bit of the lock up to wherever you had cut that core split, right? So even if you got those, if this was split across here, you know, even if you got these two picked, this part would rotate, but the lock itself wouldn't, which means you're going to have to get something down in there really far and tension up the back of it as well. There are some locks out there that you have to do that with, and I've got that Euro cylinder that's the double, and the key actually goes all the way across. And it's definitely a pain in the butt, but it seems like your design is a good design for something like that, just because there is not a good way to tension. So you'd have to get something really in there, and that would definitely defeat this wedge idea. Yeah, it might be more work though, because I think you've already got your pins drilled, your pinholes and stuff drilled out. Now, going along with that, one of the other things I'd probably try, I don't know what the inside of your lock looks like. All right, this is probably a bad example because it's not going to work on this one. Let's see, do I have another just bit sitting around here? Not really. But one of the other things I'd probably just try to see what was happening in the back of the lock, right? Back here. And I would probably make something similar to this. So this is just a little tensioner, but we just barely tipped off that edge, right? Just enough. I had done this for another lock where I had trouble blocking off one of the pins kind of thing. And I think what I would try to do is just get it back in the lock as far as I could and just probe it around and see, is there something in the back of the lock I can just grab and snag onto and then give a twist out here, you know, to get some rotation on. That would probably be one of my other ideas, right? To get something going like that, and hopefully I'd have something back there I could latch onto, but I have no idea what's going on in the back of that lock. There's probably, given you just got like a bolt thing sticking out, I'm assuming there's really nothing you could grab a hold of, but you never know, there might just be something, even if it's like a bit of that bolt, maybe you are able to get up underneath it and enough to get some tension twisted on it. So yeah, that's the other thing I would try to do, and that, doing something like that, doing that split core idea, yeah, it could pretty well get past that if there was something you could hook onto. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. I know there wasn't a whole lot new in there other than trying a wedge of some sort. I don't know, maybe I can think of something else. I started, if we're going to go along the idea of cutting a notch, some other like semi-destructive things did kind of occur to me, but there's no way you're going to really get around those, again, unless you can do something spinner-wise, maybe on the outside. Because I started thinking about, well, you could just super glue. You've got so much to work with there on that front. Could you just super glue a tensioner to the front of it, just make a handle for the core. So that's kind of along the idea of that notch idea, though a little less destructive, right? I even contemplated like chewing gum or anything kind of sticky and tacky enough to get on there. But I don't think any of that would work. I think that would just smear, even like the tacky putty stuff. So glue would probably be the way to go. So yeah, there we go. Again, if any of you have an idea, pop over to Roon Picker's channel and give him a comment. There is probably something stupid obvious I am missing. I sometimes can go way outside of the box, and then somebody just comes up with this brilliantly simple idea that I didn't even register on my radar because it was just too close to being simple to do. I've headed a much more complicated, goofy direction. Yeah. If I think of anything else, I'll definitely let you know. So anyway, there we go, everybody. Have a good one. Good luck with your lock, Roon.